direction is north. It changes concepts dramatically when we have a quadrant that is northwest, and they kind of tilt it and say that whole thing is north. So the concept of what north is was probably very different in the Mesoamerican world. Now, here is why that, first of all, doesn't bother me that there's two different ones, and secondly, why when you take the next layer of information and you put it on the map, that things like the Malaysian hypothesis fall to pieces. In addition to being able to take the text and have some sort of a convergence with a geography, we now have to put people on, and in addition to putting people on the map, the Book of Mormon very clearly tells us that there is a chronological relationship among these people, and we need to find that same chronological correlation. For instance, the Book of Mormon tells us that in the north, we're supposed to find the oldest culture, and we're supposed to find people who would have been there, let's say, 2000 BC. We are supposed to be able to find maybe a newer culture down along here, and there better be people there somewhere around 600 BC. We are also told in the Book of Mormon that people move out of this lower area and start moving towards the north, end up in the city of Zarahemla, where they meet up with some people who have come down from the north, the Mulekites, and they all meet in this area of Zarahemla along a river Sidon. That's a lot of information. That's very difficult to guess. What would happen if we look at this map of Mesoamerica and the oldest people were down here and the youngest people were up there? Be disqualified. But it isn't. That's where the old people are. That's the Olmec culture up in that area. Had been in that area for an awful long time. This is the Maya region. Interestingly enough, one of the things that happens is if you look at the linguistics of the area, the Olmec are, the best evidence anyway is that they're speaking a language that has been reconstructed and labeled Mihesoke. They're Mihesokean speakers, which is kind of a combination of two languages later, Mihe and later Soke. What happened was this Sokean group moved up that river. And this area has a connection to the people up there, and they were Sokean speakers that moved down. And historical data tell us that there is this movement of people from the north to the south along that river. It also indicates that there's information about some of these speakers that move up this area and meet up in there, and some of the cultural data from here is starting to come into here somewhere, let's say around 200 BC. Now, that just so happens to be a time period when the Book of Mormon is saying that something is happening. The Book of Mormon says that we have to have Jaredites in the north that happen to have a time depth and a geographical correlation that match up very nicely with the Jaredites. Now, please understand that I will not and do not ever say that the Olmec and the Jaredites were exactly the same. I think that the most logical thing that you can say is that the Jaredites participated in Olmec culture. Similarly, when we talk about the Maya, I do not think that either Nephites or Lamanites were Maya, but that they participated in that culture. May or may not have learned to speak that language. But there were Olmec who were not Jaredites, there were Maya who were not referenced in the Book of Mormon. But what's fascinating is that the history of this area tells us that there is a people who is coming from this area, merging here, ending up with a cultural influence from people this way going in that direction, and that just so happens to be what the Book of Mormon tells us is supposed to happen at the same time. There's another piece of information about this area down in here, which is the area of the land of Nephi. One of the cities that Dr. Sorensen suggests might have been the city of Nephi is Caminaljuyu in Guatemala. Just recently read that there is documented evidence of Cholan speakers moving into that area in about 200 BC. Think of what that means for Book of Mormon history. right in 200 BC, we don't know exactly what's happening, but according to the text, all of the pressures on the Nephite people are increasing right around this particular period of time, and increasing so severely that Mosiah has to take all the people who will go with him and flee and leave. What is changing things so dramatically that all of a sudden, at this point, somewhere around 200 BC, they have to leave this area? Well, history tells us that there's a new people that's moving in. Perhaps that's creating some pressure. Chronological. Again, if we've got the wrong people in the wrong place, it doesn't really help us. One of the ways in which you get a convergence with the Book of Mormon and things that are happening in Mesoamerica is not just in this gross location of where the people are, but the kinds of things that are happening at the same time. For instance, let's get this one. I mean, having kings in warfare really, it's nice to say that they're there, but, that's a piece of the puzzle rather than one that's particularly interesting. One of the things that I did when I was looking at the Jaredite chronology is I tried to rebuild a chronology in the Book of Mormon based on king lists and run backwards from times rather than make up an assumption of when I thought it might start. And based on this Jaredite king list chronology, I started laying out when these things might possibly have taken place. One of the things that happened after that was put together is I find that in the city of San Lorenzo, they've got a decline, and the city is being abandoned right at a time when the Book of Mormon is talking about a severe drought in the land. Now, are those two exactly the same? Don't know. But it is kind of fascinating that you're going to have in the historical record a decline of a population that in many cases, in other instances, have been tied to droughts happening at the time when the Book of Mormon is indicating that there is a severe drought in the area. Then we get into this next time period where we have changes occurring down in the Maya world, and what's happening is you're moving from smaller populations to larger populations, you're moving from villages to cities, and the political structures are beginning to change. And so the social pressure in Mesoamerica is one that is developing this push towards what will become the classic Maya model of kingship. Those pressures are happening quite early, and there are several mechanisms that have been used to try to describe how people moved from the small village into this situation where they're getting more social stratification. One of the two people who wrote the article that I think makes the most sense on this was John Clark, and he talked about a process of aggrandizers, where one of the things that they would do is you'd get some ambitious people who would start trading, and then they would get more trade goods, and this was going to increase their status in the community. Because they're increasing their status in the community, it's going to get some differential in what they have and what somebody else has, the kind of trade goods you have. You will get some sort of social inequality there. One of the things that absolutely struck me is that this is, first of all, an economic argument, and that you've got people who are looking to better themselves through trade and look at wealth, money, etc. And the second thing is the mechanism that they used was that they would have plural wives. They'd have more. The reason? They had more people to work. You get more wives, so you got a bigger family, you have a cottage industry, and now you've got more workers, you've got your built-in workforce, you create more items, you get more trade. It has always been fascinating to me that this is exactly the time period where Jacob is complaining about something that's happening in his community, and he complains about two things that you would not suspect are connected, which are costly apparel and multiple wives. And he's telling people, oh, this is terrible. Why is it those two things? How do those go together? Why are they related? Because that's what's happening at that time period. Next kinds of things happen. You get these increasing pressures to have kings. You get fortified cities. The Book of Mormon talks about the time of Christ. The best information about what's happening when Christ comes is that this is massive volcanic activity. There are lots of indications that at least around this time period, within 100 years before and after, there are a lot of very active volcanoes. We are not at the point where we can say this is the volcano that erupted and is being described in the Book of Mormon. But what you can say is that around that time period, it's pretty obvious that there was some heavy volcanic activity. So again, you're getting a convergence in time and place and in description. This one's brand new. Mark, where are you? Stand up, say hello to everybody. This is Mark right in the back. He's a Mesoamericanist getting his PhD at UC Irvine. It's been a heck of a lot of fun talking to him because we actually talk shop, and I can